The war between humans and the Zarin Empire had ended months ago, but peace was only a word, an empty sound used to hide the scars that still bled beneath the stars. Lieutenant Ethan Cole knew that better than anyone. He had fought in every major battle, watched planets burn, and seen too many faces fade in the smoke of victory. The world called him a hero, but Ethan didn't feel like one. Heroes sleep at night. He couldn't. Now he lived alone on a cold outpost, a forgotten moon covered in ice and silence. His orders were simple: guard the wreckage of the old Zarin ships that had fallen here during the last stand. Nothing ever happened. No one came. The stillness was both a punishment and a blessing. He preferred the loneliness to the memories that haunted him. Each day felt the same. The gray sky, the frozen wind, the empty sound of static from broken comms. But everything changed the night the alarms went off. Ethan ran outside, rifle in hand, expecting raiders or scavengers. Instead, he found something impossible. A small escape pod half buried in the snow, smoke rising from its sides. The hatch was open, and lying in the snow was a figure he thought could only exist in nightmares. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, silver with streaks of pale blue. Her hair was long, braided in delicate patterns he had seen only in old war briefings. Her eyes, gold, bright like liquid fire, looked at him with pain and exhaustion. Ethan froze. Every soldier in the galaxy would have recognized her face. Queen Serath, the last ruler of the Zarin Dominion, the enemy. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The icy wind blew between them, and all he could hear was her weak breathing. Her body was covered in burns and bruises, her once majestic armor broken. Ethan aimed his rifle, his training screaming at him to end it here and now. The war had taken everything from him: friends, peace, even the will to live. Killing her should have been justice, but she didn't fight back. Instead, she looked at him, her voice fragile like cracked glass. "Human, please." "Don't," he hesitated. There was something in her tone that wasn't pride or fear. It was desperation. She tried to stand, but her legs failed, and she fell forward into the snow. Ethan's instincts took over. He caught her before she hit the ground, feeling how cold her skin was, how light she felt in his arms. "Why are you here?" he demanded. "Your people are gone. The war is over." Her lips trembled. "That is why I came. I had nowhere else to go," he frowned. "You're the enemy, Queen. If anyone finds you alive, you'll be executed." She looked at him with a strange sadness. "Then perhaps I came to the right place. To die where no one will find me." Ethan should have walked away, should have let her freeze and vanish into the ice. But there was something about her eyes, something more than royal pride or alien mystery. There was pain, deep and ancient, and behind it, a plea for mercy. Without another word, he carried her inside his outpost. He laid her on a medical bed and started scanning her injuries. As the machines hummed, he realized her pulse was weak, almost fading. He couldn't believe it. He was saving the same being whose name had been cursed across human space. When she woke hours later, her voice was barely a whisper. "You saved me, human." Why, he didn't answer. He just handed her a cup of water. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. Then, after a long silence, she said something that made him freeze completely. "I came because I need your help." He looked at her, confused. "My help after what your people did?" Tears shimmered in her golden eyes. "Yes, because what I carry inside me belongs to both our kinds," Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She placed her trembling hand over her stomach. "I am carrying life," she whispered. "A life created by humans and Zarin. A child that should never have been born." Ethan stared at her, speechless. He thought she was delirious, still lost in pain or shock. But when he checked the scanner, the screen confirmed the truth. There was something growing inside her, a hybrid being, part human, part alien, something that should not exist. Yet did. He felt the world tilt around him. The enemy queen, the last of her race, was carrying a child that shared his species' blood, a child both sides would kill to control, or destroy. Serath's voice broke the silence, soft and trembling. "I escaped because they wanted to take it from me. I cannot let them use this child as a weapon. Please, human, please help me." Her eyes begged, not as a queen, not as an alien, but as a mother. And in that moment, something inside Ethan shifted. He lowered his weapon slowly. The soldier in him said she was the enemy. But the man, the broken, weary man, heard something else. A plea, a chance to save, not destroy. He took a deep breath. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "I'll protect you." Her eyes widened, glowing softly in the dim light. "Even if it costs you everything?" Ethan nodded. "Maybe it's time I risk something for the right reason." Outside, the icy wind howled across the barren moon. Inside, the warmth of two enemies began to thaw the silence of war. The next few days passed in silence, heavy and uncertain. Ethan still couldn't believe what had happened. In his small outpost on a frozen moon, he was now hiding the most wanted being in the galaxy, the queen of the Zarin Empire, and she was pregnant with a half-human child. Every time he looked at her, confusion and questions filled his mind. How was this even possible? Why had she come to him of all people? And what did she mean when she said the child belonged to both their kinds? Sarath spent most of her time resting in the infirmary room. Her body was still weak, but she refused to stay still. Sometimes Ethan caught her staring at the window, watching the gray storms outside. There was sadness in her gaze, the kind of sorrow that spoke of 1,000 lost souls. One evening, as he checked her pulse and adjusted the blanket over her shoulders, he finally asked, "Tell me the truth. How did this happen? How can there be a child like that?" Sarath hesitated. Her golden eyes flickered with pain and shame. "It began during the last months of the war," she whispered. "Your scientists captured many of my people. They wanted to create hybrid soldiers, beings stronger than both species. I was among those taken." Ethan froze. "You were captured?" She nodded slowly. "They took my blood, my DNA, they mixed it with human genes. They called it the Unity Project. I was not supposed to survive the process. But I did, and something inside me lived." Her hand went again to her stomach, gentle, protective. The child grew, slowly, impossibly. I didn't understand it at first. I was scared. Then I felt it, life, not a weapon, not a creation of war. Life, pure and innocent. Ethan's heart sank. He had heard whispers about such experiments during the war, but he had never believed them. He wanted to deny it, to say humanity would never do something so cruel. But deep down, he knew they could. He had seen too much already. "They wanted to take the child," Sarath continued softly. "They said it was theirs, that I had no right to it, so I ran. I stole a pod and fled before they could find me." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "But I could not fly far. My ship was damaged. I thought I would die out there in the cold. Until you found me." Ethan didn't know what to say. His throat felt tight. All his life he had been told the Zarin were monsters. But the woman before him, tired, wounded, carrying a child she risked everything to protect, didn't look like a monster at all. She looked human. He took a slow breath. "You said the child is part human. Do you know who?" She shook her head before he could finish. "No, they never told me whose DNA they used. Perhaps one of your scientists. Perhaps a soldier. It does not matter. What matters is what this child means." Ethan frowned. "And what does it mean?" Sarath's voice grew firm, though her body trembled. "It means a chance for both our worlds to begin again. A life born not from hate or domination, but from unity. If it survives, it could change everything." Ethan felt something stir inside him. Hope. A small, fragile thing he hadn't felt in years. For days, he took care of her quietly. He brought her food from the storage units, fixed the heaters, and even repaired the old med scanner to monitor the baby's growth. The more time they spent together, the more he realized how different she was from what he'd imagined. She spoke softly, but her words carried wisdom. She laughed once, a small, unexpected sound, and it echoed through the cold walls like sunlight breaking through clouds. At night, they sat by the small electric fire in the corner of the outpost. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. Just silence, shared and peaceful. And sometimes Sarath told him stories about her world, the shining crystal cities, the songs her people used to sing before they went to war. "Why are you helping me, human?" she asked one night, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Ethan stared into the flames. "Because I'm tired of fighting. I've seen enough death, maybe. This is my way to make something right." Sarath smiled faintly. "You are not like the others," he shrugged. "Maybe I just got old enough to see how wrong we all were." For the first time, the silence between them felt warm. But peace never stays long in a soldier's life. One morning, while Ethan was running diagnostics, his screen flickered with a red warning. A signal, a faint, unknown transmission, was detected near the moon's surface. Someone was scanning the area. His blood ran cold. He turned toward Sarath, who stood by the window, her silver hair glowing in the pale light. She didn't need to ask. She could feel it too. "They're coming," she whispered. Snowstorms howled outside the outpost, coating the small human base in layers of white silence. Inside, Ethan and Sarath tried to live one day at a time. The signal they had detected had gone quiet again, but both knew it was only a matter of time before someone came. They were being hunted by humans, maybe even by what remained of the Zaren. Still, Ethan tried to give Sarath a sense of peace. He repaired what he could, the heaters, the old lights, the broken cooking unit. He made a small space in the storage room, a warm corner with blankets and soft lights for her to rest. Slowly, the cold outpost began to feel less like a prison and more like a home. Sarath's condition changed each day. Sometimes she was strong and smiling. Other days her body ached and her alien blood shimmered faintly beneath her skin, as if it were glowing from within. Ethan learned to watch her closely, to make sure she ate and stayed warm. When she grew too weak to stand, he would read to her from old human books he'd kept from his training days, stories about oceans, music, and the quiet blue skies of Earth. She would listen in silence, her golden eyes soft. "Your world sounds beautiful," she said one evening as he finished reading. "It used to be," Ethan replied, "before the war took its color." Sarath looked at him for a long time. "Perhaps the child will see it bright again." Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe. Days turned to weeks. The moon outside never changed, cold, pale, and endless. But something inside the outpost did. Between the soldier and the alien queen, a bond began to form. It was unspoken at first. Small gestures, shared glances, soft words in the stillness. Ethan didn't understand it. He had spent years hating her people. But now, when he looked at her, he saw not an enemy, but someone who had lost as much as he had, maybe even more. One night, a terrible storm hit the moon. Power flickered and the lights dimmed. Ethan rushed to check the generators while Sarath waited in the dark, clutching her stomach. The baby had begun to move more, and sometimes the glow beneath her skin pulsed like a heartbeat. When Ethan returned, soaked in snow, he found her sitting by the flickering firelight, her hands trembling. He dropped beside her. "Are you in pain?" She shook her head, breathing unevenly. "No, it's just strong tonight. I can feel it." He watched as a faint blue light shimmered around her fingers, wrapping gently over her belly. It was like watching a living miracle. Ethan whispered, "It's beautiful." Sarath smiled weakly. "It is a reminder that even in war, life still dares to grow." Her words hit him deeply. He thought of all the people he had lost, of the destruction he had seen. And now, here in the middle of nowhere, an alien queen was carrying hope in her womb, a child that shouldn't exist but did. Later that night, as the storm grew worse, Sarath began to tremble again. Ethan rushed to her side. "What's wrong?" "It's nothing," she said, but he could see fear in her eyes. "The child grows faster than I expected. My body struggles to keep balance," he frowned. "Then we need to get you real medical help." She grabbed his wrist, shaking her head. "No, if they find me, they'll take the child. They will study it. You know what your kind will do." Ethan knew she was right. The human government would never let a hybrid like that live freely. They would see it as a weapon, not a child, so he nodded. "Then we'll keep you hidden." "I'll find a way." Sarath's expression softened. "You would risk everything for me?" He hesitated, then looked straight into her eyes. "Not for you. For them, for the child. For something pure." She smiled faintly, but he could see the emotion behind it. The gratitude, the loneliness, the small flicker of trust. Over the next few weeks, their closeness grew. Ethan taught her how to use the base systems, how to heat food, check energy levels, and use the comms only in emergencies. In return, Sarath taught him fragments of her language, words that had no direct translation but were full of meaning. One night, as they sat by the soft glow of the fire, she whispered one such word, "Ralith." He looked at her curiously. "What does it mean?" Her golden eyes glimmered. "It means a bond born in impossible times." Ethan didn't reply. He just nodded, feeling the warmth in his chest. But even in moments of peace, the danger outside never truly faded. The long-range sensors started catching movement again, a faint human signal getting closer each day. Ethan knew the storm had delayed them, but once it cleared, someone would come searching. He didn't tell Sarath right away. He didn't want her to worry. Instead, he worked harder, sealing entrances, jamming scanners, preparing hiding spots. He told himself it was duty, that he was protecting her because it was the right thing to do. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He cared for her now, and that terrified him more than any war he had ever fought. As the cold wind howled outside the outpost, Ethan lay awake that night staring at the ceiling. He could hear her breathing softly from the next room. He thought about the promise he had made to protect her and the unborn child. He didn't know what the future would bring. But one thing was clear. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was fighting for her. The peace inside the outpost did not last. Ethan had known it couldn't. Peace never lasted long for a soldier. It started with a faint sound one morning, a soft hum in the sky. Then the scanners began to flicker red again. A ship was entering the moon's orbit. It was human. Ethan's heart sank. He knew what that meant. Someone had found their signal. Maybe a passing satellite had picked it up, or maybe the military had never stopped searching. Either way, they were no longer alone. He rushed to Sarath's room. She was sitting near the heater, her silver hair glowing softly in the dim light. When she saw his face, she knew. "They are coming," she whispered. Ethan nodded, tightening his jaw. "You need to stay out of sight." "If they find you, I know," she said quietly. Her hand rested protectively on her belly. "But they will not stop. They want what grows inside me." He wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but he couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. Ethan checked the weapons locker. He hadn't touched it in months. The rifle felt heavier than he remembered. He loaded it with trembling hands, his mind racing with memories. Of orders, of war, of all the faces he had lost. But this time, he wasn't fighting for his country or command. He was fighting for her. Outside, the storm had cleared. The air was sharp and still, too quiet. He could already see distant lights cutting through the horizon, search drones scanning the ice fields. He only had hours, maybe less. He went back inside. Sarath stood by the window, her eyes glowing faintly with fear and sadness. "Ethan," she said softly, "you can still run. They will forgive you if you turn me in." He froze. "You think I could do that?" She lowered her gaze. "You are human. You owe nothing to me. I am your enemy." Ethan walked closer, his voice low but steady. "You stopped being my enemy the day I saw you cry for that child." For a moment she just stared at him, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something more. But instead she only nodded and whispered, "Then we faced them together." Hours passed like minutes. The sound of engines grew louder, echoing through the frozen cliffs. The human soldiers landed near the wreck field, their heavy boots thudding against the ice. Ethan watched through a small crack in the metal door. He could see their insignias, their helmets, his own people. He recognized the voice of the squad leader calling through a loudspeaker. "Lieutenant Ethan Cole, you are ordered to surrender immediately. You are harboring classified Zarin property." Property. That word made Ethan's blood boil. He looked back at Sarath, who sat silently, holding her stomach. Her eyes were filled with fear, but also something stronger. Trust. She believed he wouldn't give her up. He grabbed her hand. "There's a tunnel beneath the floor. It leads to the old storage caverns. Stay there until I come for you." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "If you fight, they will kill you." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then they'll have to try." Before she could stop him, he opened the door and stepped out into the cold. The soldiers turned their weapons on him instantly. "Lieutenant Cole," one of them shouted, "you're under arrest for treason." Ethan raised his hand slowly. "You don't understand. She's not a threat. But they didn't let him finish. The commander barked, "Where is the Zarin Queen?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "You won't touch her." In that instant, something broke inside him. All the pain, all the guilt, all the rage he had buried since the war. Everything came flooding out. He ducked as the first shot hit the snow beside him and fired back. The sound of plasma fire filled the air. The battle was short but violent. Ethan moved like a man possessed, driven by something more than survival. He wasn't just defending a life, he was defending hope. When the smoke cleared, the outpost stood half-ruined, the walls scorched and burning. Ethan stumbled inside, his shoulder bleeding, his hands shaking. Sarath was there, waiting, tears glistening in her eyes. She rushed to him and pressed her glowing hands against his wound. A faint light spread beneath her palms, easing the pain. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan smiled weakly. "I couldn't let them take you." She looked at him, her lips trembling. "You're bleeding because of me." He brushed away her tears with a trembling hand. "No, I'm alive because of you." Outside, more ships could be heard in the distance, reinforcements. They didn't have much time. Sarath looked toward the sound, then back at him. "They will not stop. You must leave. Take the child when it comes. Promise me." Ethan's heart clenched. "Don't talk like that." She gripped his hand, her eyes glowing brighter. "Promise me, Ethan." He wanted to argue, to tell her they'd escape together, but the look in her eyes silenced him. It was the same look he had seen in soldiers who knew their fate and still stood tall. Finally, he nodded. "I promise," she smiled through her tears. "Then there is still hope." Outside, thunder echoed through the sky as the next wave of ships descended. The hunters were coming, and inside the small broken outpost, two souls, once enemies, prepared to make their last stand together. The outpost shook under the roar of engines as more human ships descended through the gray clouds. The sound grew louder every minute, echoing across the icy plains. Ethan could see the reflection of burning thrusters on the snow outside. They were surrounded now. There was no escape. Inside, the air was tense and heavy. Ethan was wounded, his arm wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage, but his hands didn't stop moving. He loaded weapons, sealed doors, and rerouted power to the defense shields. Every heartbeat counted. Sarath stood beside him, her face pale but determined. The glow beneath her skin pulsed faintly. Her child was growing faster than ever, and the strain was visible in her trembling hands. "You can't fight them all," she said softly, watching him prepare. "I don't need to," Ethan replied. "I just need to buy you time." Her golden eyes shimmered. "You don't have to do this. You've already done enough." He turned to her, his voice firm but gentle. "You came to me for help. I gave you my word. I won't break it now." Sarath's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She just looked at him, her heart full of emotions she couldn't name. She had met many humans in her life, soldiers, scientists, killers, but none like him. This man, who had every reason to hate her, now risked everything for her unborn child. Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of drones. They were scanning the area, searching for life signatures. Ethan knew it was only a matter of minutes before they breached the outpost. He moved closer to Sarath, his eyes steady. "When they break in, you'll go through the tunnel. It leads to the southern ridge. There's an old cave there. You'll be safe for a while." "And you?" she asked quietly. "I'll make sure they follow me, not you." Sarath shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "No, you will die." Ethan smiled sadly. "Then I'll die doing something that matters." Before she could argue, the sirens wailed. The first explosion hit the northern wall, shaking the entire structure. Dust and ice rained down from the ceiling. Ethan grabbed his rifle and ran to the entrance. Sarath followed him, clutching her stomach, trying to stay on her feet. The soldiers outside shouted commands. Plasma bolts sliced through the metal door, melting it from the edges. The outpost was falling apart, but Ethan stood tall. His eyes burned with purpose. He turned once more toward her. "Go, Sarath, now!" She hesitated. "Ethan." He met her gaze. "Please, for the child." Her lips trembled as she nodded. She wanted to stay, to fight beside him, but her body was too weak. She pressed a glowing hand to his chest just above his heart. "May the stars guide you," she whispered. Then she turned and disappeared into the tunnel. Seconds later, the door gave way. Soldiers stormed in, their armor shining under the flickering lights. Ethan opened fire. The small room filled with light and sound, plasma bolts, smoke, and fire. He moved from cover to cover, his training taking over. Each shot he fired wasn't for hate or revenge, it was for her, for the tiny life that might one day know peace. The fight seemed endless. His shoulder burned, his vision blurred, but he didn't stop. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. "Stand down, Cole," shouted one of the soldiers. "You're defending the enemy." Ethan's voice came out hoarse but strong. "I'm defending life," he fired again. 2 soldiers fell. The others hesitated. They hadn't expected one man to fight so fiercely, but numbers always win. A shot caught him across the side and he fell to one knee. The pain was sharp, but his thoughts were clear. He crawled toward the control panel and hit the emergency lockdown. Thick metal doors fell, sealing the tunnels behind him, protecting Sarath's escape. The soldiers realized what he'd done and shouted, trying to override the lock, but it was too late. She was gone. Ethan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Smoke filled the room, the heat pressing down on him. He could barely hear now, only the faint sound of his heartbeat and the whisper of wind through the broken door. One of the soldiers stepped closer, weapon raised. "Where is she?" Ethan looked up at him, blood running down his face. "Somewhere you'll never find her." The soldier aimed again, but before he could fire, a sudden tremor shook the outpost. A deep glowing light spread across the floor. It came from the tunnel, Sarath's power. The soldiers stumbled back as a soft blue wave rippled through the base, bending the metal walls like liquid. Ethan smiled faintly, realizing what she had done. She was protecting him even as she fled. The soldiers retreated, shouting as the walls began to collapse around them. Ethan closed his eyes. The last thing he saw was that beautiful light, gentle, warm, alive. Somewhere beyond the falling debris, he heard her voice echo softly through the comlink she had left open. "Ethan, hold on. You'll see our child. You must." Her voice faded with static. Then everything went dark. When Ethan opened his eyes again hours later, the base was silent. Smoke hung in the air and snow drifted in through the cracks. The soldiers were gone. He didn't know if they fled or were buried by the collapse. He pushed himself up, pain coursing through his body. He was still alive. He looked toward the tunnel door, now sealed shut. And for the first time in years, Ethan whispered a prayer. "Please, let her make it." Outside, the storm began to fall again, covering the ruins in white, and far beneath the ice, the alien queen hid in the dark with the unborn child of two worlds, still fighting to bring hope into existence. The storm raged above the frozen plains, howling like a wounded beast. Deep beneath the ice, in a narrow cave glowing with faint blue light, Sarath sat against the wall, breathing heavily. Her strength was fading fast. Days had passed since she fled the outpost. Her body trembled, her pulse weak, but inside her, new life was fighting to be born. She looked down at her hands. The glow beneath her skin had grown stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. The child was coming sooner than she expected. She pressed her palm to her stomach and whispered softly, "Hold on, my little one, just a little longer." Every movement sent pain shooting through her body. Her species was not meant to give birth away from their sacred chambers where healers guided them. But she had no choice. She was alone, hiding from soldiers who would kill her and take the child. Outside the cave, the world was quiet again. The snow covered every trace of her escape. She could almost feel the connection through the ether. Ethan's faint energy, his heartbeat somewhere far away. It gave her strength. She remembered his last words before the explosion. "For the child." Tears filled her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered, "you gave me a reason to fight." Hours passed. The cave grew colder. Finally, with a cry that echoed through the stone walls, the child was born. The light that came from the baby was soft and warm, neither fully human nor fully alien. Its skin shimmered like pale silver, and tiny blue eyes blinked open for the first time. Sarath cradled the baby close to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "You are hope." The child cooed softly, a sound so pure that it melted the silence of the cave. For the first time since her planet fell, Sarath felt peace. But her peace didn't last long. She could feel her energy draining away. The birth had taken too much from her. Her vision blurred, her hands shaking. She knew what this meant. Her kind could not survive giving birth without the royal healers. Still, she smiled weakly, brushing her hand over the baby's small head. "You will live," she whispered, "even if I do not." She wrapped the baby in a piece of her cloak and placed it in a protective shell she had carried, a living pod that would keep it warm and hidden. Her breathing slowed. She looked toward the cave entrance, her golden eyes fading. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice trembling, "find our child." Then she went still. The cave became silent except for the faint hum of the life pod. Inside, the baby slept peacefully as the light of the pod grew brighter, protecting it. Days later, on the surface, a group of rescue scouts moved across the frozen plains. The battle was over. The human fleet had left, believing the planet abandoned. Ethan stumbled through the snow, his body weak but alive. He had survived the collapse, rescued by a small team of medics days after the outpost fell, but he couldn't rest. He refused to leave the planet, not without her. He had searched for days following the faint energy trail left behind by Serath's kind. His hands were numb, his face scarred, but his heart beat with one purpose: to find her. When he reached the southern ridge, he saw a faint blue light flickering in the snow. His breath caught. He followed it, crawling through the narrow tunnel until he found the cave. And there she was. Serath sat motionless against the wall, her eyes closed, her skin pale as frost. For a moment, Ethan froze. Then his knees gave out and he fell beside her. "No, no, please," he whispered, his voice breaking. He touched her cheek. It was cold. He held her close, tears falling silently. "I made it," he said through his grief. "I kept my promise. But you—" Then he saw the pod. It rested beside her, glowing softly. Ethan reached out and opened it. Inside was the baby, tiny, breathing, alive. His breath caught. The child looked at him with bright blue eyes, the same shade as Serath's energy. It reached out, a small hand touching his finger. In that single moment, Ethan felt something change deep within him. All the pain, all the war, all the hate. It faded. He lifted the child into his arms, holding it close. "You made it," he whispered. "Both of you did." He looked back at Serath, his voice trembling. "I'll protect them. I swear it." Snow began to fall from the mouth of the cave, soft and silent. Ethan wrapped the baby in his jacket and looked at the frozen queen one last time. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. "Rest now," he said. "Your child is safe. I'll make sure they know who you were." Then he stood, holding the baby close, and walked out into the storm. As the wind howled and the world turned white, a faint glow followed him, a soft blue shimmer, like the touch of a spirit guiding his way. That night, in the endless snow, a human soldier carried the last hope of two worlds in his arms. He didn't know where to go or how long he could survive. But he knew one thing: he would never stop fighting, because somewhere deep in his heart, Ethan could still hear her voice. "You must live. For the child." And so he did. The storm had long passed. The snow-covered plains were silent again, hiding the scars of war beneath layers of white. But far from the ruins, a single man walked across the wasteland, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Ethan's steps were slow, heavy with exhaustion, but his arms never wavered. The child in his arms slept quietly, its tiny fingers gripping the edge of his jacket. The faint blue glow beneath the baby's skin warmed the air around them, keeping them alive through the cold nights. Ethan looked down at the sleeping face and smiled weakly. "You're stronger than me already," he whispered. It took him 3 more days to reach the evacuation camp. When the humans saw him, they stared in disbelief. He was half frozen, bloodied, but alive and carrying something strange. The medics rushed to him, but he refused to let go of the child. "This one stays with me," he said, his voice hoarse. She's my child." The doctors didn't understand at first. Then they scanned the baby. The readings were impossible, half human, half alien. Some were horrified. Others were speechless. News of it spread quickly. The command wanted answers. When the officials came to question him, Ethan sat quietly in the infirmary, holding the baby against his chest. They asked him again and again, "What have you done? Why did you protect the enemy?" Ethan looked up at them with tired eyes. "Because she wasn't my enemy. She was a mother. She was a queen. And now her child is mine to protect." The room fell silent. No one knew what to say. Some called it treason. Others called it a miracle. The baby's existence broke every law of nature and war. But Ethan didn't care. He didn't fight for medals or forgiveness. He only cared about the promise he made to Serath. Months passed. The war ended quietly. Both sides had lost too much. The alien forces retreated to rebuild their shattered worlds, and humans began to realize that peace might be the only path left. Ethan was no longer a soldier. He lived in a small cabin near the forest, away from the cities. There, he raised the child. Seren, he called her, after her mother's name in her language, meaning light of dawn. Seren grew fast. Her eyes shone like twin stars, and her laughter filled the empty cabin with warmth. She was curious, gentle, and strong. Sometimes when she touched the trees, leaves shimmered faintly, When she cried, the lights flickered softly, as if the air itself tried to comfort her. Ethan watched her with pride and pain mixed together. Every smile reminded him of Sarath. Every word of her innocence reminded him of what love had cost him. At night, he would sit by the window, holding the locket Sarath had given him before she fled. Inside was a fragment of crystal that glowed faintly when he spoke her name. He often whispered to it, "She's beautiful, Sarath. You'd be proud of her." The stars above always seemed to shine a little brighter when he said those words. Years passed like that, quiet and tender. But peace never lasts long. One day, government officials came again. They had discovered that Seren's abilities were growing. They wanted to take her, to study her. Ethan stood in front of them, calm but firm. "She's not an experiment," he said. "She's a child." The officer replied coldly, "She could be dangerous." Ethan looked down at Seren, who was hiding behind him, frightened. He took her hand gently. "She's the only hope we have left," he said softly. The officer hesitated. There was something in Ethan's eyes, something unshakable. It wasn't anger. It was love. Finally, they left, warning him that they would return. But they never did. Maybe even they saw that some things were sacred. When Seren turned 10, she began asking about her mother. "Where is she?" she asked one night as they watched the stars. Ethan smiled sadly. "She's up there," he said, pointing to the brightest star in the sky. "She was brave, and she loved you before she even saw you. Will I ever meet her?" Ethan's throat tightened. He looked at his daughter's glowing eyes, the same golden hue as Sarath's, and felt tears forming. "One day," he whispered. "In a way you already have. She's part of you." Seren leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then I'll make her proud." He smiled and held her close. "You already do." Many years later, when Ethan was old and gray, Seren stood over him as he lay resting in the same cabin. Her hands glowed faintly, wrapping him in warmth. He looked up at her, weak but peaceful. "You look just like her," he murmured. "I know," she said with a soft smile. "And I'll carry both your names when I go beyond the stars." He reached out, touching her cheek. "Then I'll never be far." The light in the room grew brighter. Outside, the forest shimmered with soft blue energy. And when Ethan finally closed his eyes for the last time, his face was calm, his hand still resting in hers. Seren looked at the night sky, tears glimmering on her cheeks. She raised her hand toward the stars, and a brilliant pulse of light spread across the horizon, a signal reaching far beyond Earth. It was a message of peace, a message from the child of two worlds, and far away among the stars a faint voice answered her. "My daughter, you've done well." Ethan Cole's story became legend. The human who protected the enemy, the soldier who loved the alien queen, the man whose compassion ended a war, and in the heart of the galaxy where light and darkness met, a single truth remained. Humanity's greatest strength was never its power. It was its ability to love beyond boundaries.